up, guys? I'm Sarah Weaver, and I'm back. I know I missed a week last week because of Christmas and all that stuff going on, but I'm back. I'm here. You don't have to be sad anymore, okay? I know you're probably crying in your room, depressed, lonely, missing me, missing this face. But here I am. So wipe those tears from your little eyes, okay? And if that wasn't creepy enough, today I have a great true crime story for you guys. And this week's story is on Harold Shipman, who is a doctor turned serial killer. So we have a good one for you guys this week. If I didn't say this already, I'm Sarah Weaver. Hi, nice to meet you. And I do true crime videos every Tuesday on my channel, and I get ready, do my makeup while I'm telling you guys the story. So if you are interested in these types of videos and you want to stick around, hear this story, please subscribe below. Please give this video a thumbs up. Also turn on that notification bell, so you can see my face every week, get notified that I uploaded a video, and you won't have to cry in that corner anymore, because I honestly felt bad for you having to do that, and I'm out of tissues over here, so anyways, without further ado, let's just jump into it, shall we? Okay. So, let's jump into it, okay? This week we're talking about Harold Shipman, like I said, and Harold was born in 1946 to a working class family. He was a middle child, and he had a pretty normal childhood from what I read. He did have kind of a domineering mother, and, I think she was kind of strict on him, and it says that she instilled an early sense of superiority in him at a young age, so I think that kind of inhibited him when he was trying to make friends in school and things like that. He kind of thought he was better than everyone else, which is kind of weird coming from a middle class family. You would think that she would have instilled a little bit better values in him than that, but here we are, right? So eventually his mother would become diagnosed with lung cancer, and Harold was her caretaker, and he would just, be there with her whenever the doctor would come give her morphine for the pain and things like that. And he actually started to become weirdly fascinated with morphine and the effects that it had on her during her illness and everything. And he was kind of interested himself in experimenting with, drugs and what that feeling was like and all that. So eventually his mother would pass away in 1963. Harold was pretty devastated by her death. Obviously, that's his mother, but it made him want to go to medical school and actually study to be a doctor so he could help people like his mom. So 2 years later, he would be accepted to Leeds Medical School, and I guess he failed his entrance exam the first time, but then the second time around, he was accepted. So he started his internship. So around the same time, he actually met his wife. Her name is Primrose, and she was 17 years old and he was 19. And they got pregnant not too long after they started dating. So they just decided to get married at a very young age. And it sounds like, they were actually really in love still, and they stayed together for a long time. So by 1974, they actually had 2 kids together, and he had joined a medical practice in Yorkshire, or Yorkshire. Not sure how you say that, but close enough, right? So Harold was thriving as a family practitioner at the time and, getting more well known in the community with his patients and things like that. And unfortunately, he actually became addicted to painkillers around the same time. He would either forge prescriptions for people, or he would forge prescriptions in larger quantities for the people who actually needed the prescription. So he would forge it either for somebody who just didn't need it at all, and he would go get their prescription or whatever, and then he would do it the other way around, where he would prescribe more to somebody so that he could take some of it and give them their proper dosage. So after doing this for a while, he was actually caught by one of his colleagues in 1975. He was actually fined for the stealing of the drugs and forging the prescriptions and everything, and convicted of that. I don't know if he was forced to go to rehab. It sounds like it was one of those situations where they're like, you can either go to this rehab facility or you can, serve your time, whatever. Or it was forced rehabbed. I'm not really sure. Maybe it was voluntary. I don't know. But either way, he goes to rehab. He supposedly gets better, and then he's out. So a few years after this happens, he is accepted to a new hospital called Donnybrook Medical Center in Hyde, England, and he actually remained on the staff there for almost 2 decades. One day, now this is where things get a little bit juicy, okay? One day, the local undertaker, who is basically the mortician, that's, I think, the more commonly used name, at least in the States. So the mortician notices that this doctor is having quite a high number of deaths in his patients, among his patients. And he's like, okay, that's a little concerning. Like, maybe I should, look into this and just see what's going on here. So he decides to go and just talk to Dr. Shipman directly. And he's like, hey man, what's up with this? I see your patients are just dropping like flies, and it seems like a pretty high number of them, and Shipman, fortunately for him, he mostly preyed on older people, so he kind of got away with just saying either they died of old age or they had some other pre-existing condition or, something like that. And a lot of the time when people would come around and question him, he could just, blow it off and say that was the excuse, and people believed him most of the time until another medical colleague, Susan Booth, she decided that she would look into this for herself. And she went straight to the coroner's office and she was like, have you noticed this too? Because I'm noticing it. And the guy's like, yeah, this is weird. Something's going on here. And I think we need to get to the bottom of this. The guy says it's nothing, but we know it's something. Come on. We ain't stupid. Susan's like, yeah, let's go tell the police about this, okay? This guy is fishy, okay? It's stinky in here. So they go down and they tell the police, and they're like, can you guys look into this guy? It's weird, it's weird. So they do. And the police conduct a covert investigation. So I guess that means they did it without Shipman knowing. So somehow they got into his medical records that he keeps for his patients, and they looked at the records to see, what the causes of death were and things like that. And it looked like from the records that everything lined up. You could see, like the patient was slowly declining over time. And it didn't look fishy just looking at the records, right? But another thing that they noticed with these patients of his that would die is that they were all positioned in the same way, or at least similar ways when they died. So they would either be sitting in a recliner, fully clothed, like just sitting there, and they looked very peaceful. Some would be laying on the couch in the same position, like very peaceful, clothes on, everything, just very put together. And it just seemed that they all just died like peacefully, which is suspicious because if somebody's having a heart attack or something like that, they're most likely not going to be just relaxing in the recliner. They're going to be in pain. They're going to probably fall to the floor, something like that. But it was just weird that all these patients were being found in such relaxed positions, I guess. When the police were looking into Shipman and all of his records and everything, they somehow didn't look into like his personal records as just like a human being. And they missed the fact that he had these previous charges where he went to rehab and forged these prescriptions and all this stuff. So they kind of like didn't have any reason to suspect him just from, his medical records of the patients. All they knew of Shipman was that he was very well respected in the community, and it was a small town, and it seemed like a lot of the people that lived there, just had good things to say about him. And up until this point, they had no reason to suspect anything of him, and they just kind of like let him do his thing. And also, like when somebody has a family and kids, like they kind of, I think, go down on your radar of suspects. You don't think anything's going on with like a dad that has 2 kids and, he's a doctor. I mean, also just the title of being a doctor, I feel, kind of sets you apart from just some like Joe Schmo, So after a while, the authorities decided that they would just do a deeper investigation into Shipman, and they realized that Shipman has actually forged the records for his patients. So at this point, they're like, okay, we got this guy. Like, we know that you've been forging things, and we know that you've been fudging the records and everything, and what's up, dude? Like, you might as well just confess to us what's going on. They can't get Shipman to confess anything. He still, sticks to his story that he's innocent and all of that. So it's hard to tell when you go back and look at everything to see when exactly he started killing his patients, because a lot of the time what he would do is after his patients died, he would recommend to the family that they just cremate the body and really, you don't need to look into this any further. We don't need to do a whole autopsy or anything like that. Like, just believe what I'm telling you. This is the reason they died. And even the ones who had, like, who didn't have pre-existing conditions or anything wrong with them, they were just older, their families for some reason just didn't question him. I guess, a lot of people just believe whatever their doctor tells them and they don't question things. They're like, yeah, grandpa was old, let's just chalk it up to that, and that's that. Let's have him cremated. We'll just do the funeral, all the things, and just move on. And I mean, they don't think that their doctor could have killed the person, so they don't really look into it. So one day, Shipman's crimes were finally put to an end when Angela Woodruff's mother passed away. Her mother's name was Kathleen Grundy, and she was an 81-year-old widow who was found dead in her home in 1998 after a visit from none other than Dr. Shipman himself. So, like the other patients, he advised the daughter, there's nothing to look into here. We don't need to do an autopsy. But instead of cremating the body, they decided to do a burial. So they buried her mother. But after the burial, Kathleen's daughter just was still suspicious. She's like, I still just don't trust this guy. There's something off here, and I'm gonna figure out what it is. So, lucky enough, it turned out that Angela, her daughter, is actually a lawyer. So she ended up helping out with all, her mother's legal stuff after her death. And she's going through her things one day, and she finds this second will. And this will is different from the other one that she had. And this will, suspiciously, has Dr. Shipman's name in the will, saying that some of her money will go to him if she dies. So automatically, Angela's like, this is suspicious as hell, and I'm gonna look into this more. She notices at the bottom of the will where the signature is. She's like, that's not my mom's signature. There's something off. She compares it to other signatures of hers, and she's just like, I'm not convinced that that's my mom's signature. So she just starts to get convinced that Shipman did something dirty here, and he murdered her mother and wanted some of her money, So Angela goes to the police, and she's like, can you just give me your opinion on this, and does this look like it's forged to you? And the police are like, yeah, we agree. You are right here, and, let's just go see what's going on. So what they end up doing is they exhume her mother's grave, and they do an autopsy on her body. And what do you know? The autopsy reveals that she was overdosed with morphine. They also are able to tell that the morphine was administered 3 hours before her death. And it's precisely the same time that Shipman was over at her house. What do you know? So next they end up raiding Shipman's home, and they find a bunch of jewelry, which they suspect is from some of his victims, which I'm like, do all serial killers keep women's jewelry after they kill them? That's such a weird thing to keep. I mean, I don't know. How would you remember, which jewelry belonged to which person? And maybe you don't care about that. I don't know. Also, it's like one of those things where obviously it's not your jewelry because you're a man and you're probably not wearing women's jewelry. So it's kind of a dead giveaway that that's not yours. And I mean, maybe it could have been his wife's. He could have tried to pass it off as that, but somehow they were able to figure out that it wasn't his wife's or his kids or anything, and it belonged to these old ladies that he's killing. Probably had some pearls in there, probably had, some big rubies, all the things. And then last but not least, they found an old typewriter in his house, which they later were able to prove was the typewriter that the will was written with. So after they found all of this evidence, it was pretty apparent to police that this probably wasn't the only person that Shipman had done this to, right? So they're like, let's just open a whole investigation on this guy and see what we can find. So they start looking into just all of his most recent patients who have been visited by him and then died following his visit. So they go and they exhume their bodies. A lot of them were cremated, as I said, but the ones that they could exhume, they did, and they did autopsies on those bodies, and of course found the same results. They had all been overdosed with morphine. So I also mentioned earlier that a lot of these families who had people pass away, they never really questioned things, or if they did, Shipman was able to produce these falsified records, right, of their deaths. And he would go back, he would kill them, and then he would go back in their records and change things to look like it was a natural death, right? Or there was some other reason that they died. So what he didn't realize when he was doing this and making these alterations, the computer was actually logging that each time he made a change to something. So it would note, like, this day he came in and edited something. And so the computer had these records of the alterations, even though I don't think it would tell what the alteration was, but it would just tell that something was done to it. So after all of these bodies were exhumed and had their autopsies on them, they concluded that 15 of these people were in fact killed by Shipman. And of course there are, I think actually comes to over like 200 people who they believe he killed, but maybe didn't have all the evidence to prove that. And, you know, there were a lot of cremations, like I said, so it's hard to tell like how many people he actually killed. They don't know the exact number, but it was probably hundreds. I mean, he was there working there for, you know, 2 decades, I think it said, so 20 years. And, you know, that's a long time. A lot of stuff can happen in 20 years, especially you have multiple patients a day. Sometimes multiple patients a day would die on the same day. So, you know, it's a lot of people, and it's very, very sad and dark and super unfortunate. So on September 7th in 1998, Shipman was charged with 15 deaths, and then he was also charged with a count of forgery as well. Shipman's trial commenced in 1995 in Preston Crown Court. So during the trial, one of the things that was said was that Shipman actually might have gotten addicted to killing people. And who knows if he was in the right frame of mind. I mean, if he was really, you know, addicted to these drugs and morphine or whatever the drug was that he was taking, the prescriptions, I wonder if that caused him to somehow, you know, have a lag in judgment. Or so during the trial, the prosecution was saying, you know, since he killed all of these people, he probably had some weird control issue with like power and feeling like he can control whether someone lives and dies and things like that. And they dismissed any claims that he was trying to act compassionately by killing these people. So I guess what the defense was, well, at least part of it, they were trying to say that, you know, these people were old and maybe they were suffering and things like that, and he was just, you know, doing the right thing and putting them out of their misery, and, you know, that's why he did it. He had, you know, good intentions behind it or whatever. The only thing that was wrong with that was that it seemed that none of these patients of his were suffering with any type of terminal illness. So that defense really didn't end up holding much weight there. So Angela Woodruff, who was the daughter of Gertrude, who, passed away, and they looked into her death and everything, she was the first witness to take the stand. And she told her whole story and everything. And even though the defense tried to undermine her and poke holes in her story and things like that, they didn't get away with it. The jury was able to see right through them doing that, and they believed her. So after Angela took the stand, the government pathologist ended up taking the stand as well. And he came up and told them, all about the post-mortem things that they found after they exhumed the bodies. And he talked about how the morphine and toxicity was the, cause of death in most cases. And another thing that they were able to bring to trial was the fact that Grundy's fingerprints, the old lady's fingerprints, weren't actually on her document, her will, anywhere. And Shipman's fingerprints were on the will. So they thought that was another, just another reason to think that the document was forged. And they showed that to the jury. The jury is kind of, obviously leaning in the direction of believing the prosecution rather than the defense. They also show the jury the handwriting analysis, and they have somebody talk about that and show, it wasn't her signature, all this stuff. Here's the typewriter we found, and here's, what the lettering looks like and all that stuff. And they were able to just show them how everything was linked together. Next, police computer analysis was able to come to the court and show them, how the records were fudged on the computers, and they showed like the timestamps of when everything was changed and all of that stuff. So they weren't able to get away with that either. Also, during the trial, another discovery was made, and that was that Shipman would actually, if the patient died while the family was in the house or in the room, Shipman would get on the phone and pretend that he was calling 911 to get somebody to, rush to the hospital. But what they found out was that there was actually never any 911 calls made in those situations. So the whole time he was just faking it, and then he would, find out that the person was dead or whatever, check their pulse, whatever he's going to do. And he'd be like, oh, they're dead. And he would hang up the phone, we got to call the coroner's office or whatever. So he just left all this, little evidence and small things, most of the time, small things, and things that he could, or things that he thought that he could get away with because he thought they would never dig up the bodies, or at least, there were enough that were cremated that I won't get away with it and stuff like that. And then last but not least, they also had all the evidence of the prescriptions that he was writing that were falsified, or he was writing them to patients who already needed this prescription, but he was, prescribing more than they needed, all that stuff. So they had all that evidence, and they had all these, witness testimonies and everything, and all these experts were brought in. And this guy, to me, really had no chance of winning this case. So finally, in January of 2000, he was indeed convicted of all 15 counts of murder and the one count of forgery. So the judge passed 15 life sentences as well as 4 years for the forgery, which he ended up commuting to a whole life sentence, meaning this guy is never going to get parole. He's never going to get out of here. he's here for life. So Shipman was incarcerated in Durham prison, and he remained in Durham prison throughout all the investigations and everything. The whole time he maintained his innocence. He acted like, these people were crazy for thinking that of him, all this stuff. His wife and other family members were there supporting him through the whole thing. They never suspected anything, or at least if they did, I guess they just took his side, and I don't know why you would do that, but that's what they did. So later in 2003, he moved to a different prison in Wakefield, which made it easier for his family to visit him. How nice, right? How convenient for them. They get to, whatever. So finally, on January 13th in 2004, Shipman ended his life. He was found in his prison cell, and he used a sheet to hang himself, basically. He was tied to the bars of his window, and he was pronounced dead. Now, there remains some mystery with what happened to his body after he died. I guess there was some suspicion that he was murdered in his cell, and he actually didn't commit suicide. Somebody killed him. But I'm not sure what the thing about the body is. So I guess either the morgue is hiding his body and they don't want people to know his real cause of death, or some people suspect that his family has the body. I don't know what they're doing with it, but there's some reason people are trying to prove that he did not die of suicide. All right, so that's all I have for you guys today. The story is like super, super dark. I know I didn't really add much commentary in there in the middle, but I just am like super disturbed by anytime like I find out there's a story of a doctor or a dentist or even a police officer, anybody who is in the profession of saving lives, and it turns out that they're actually the one taking lives. Super heartbreaking, super twisted and disturbing, and yeah, so despite that disturbing, horrible story, I hope you guys have a good week this week, and if you like these videos, I would love to hear from you in the comments below. Also, subscribe. Don't forget to give it a thumbs up too. All those things really help my videos get seen by people and all that stuff, and obviously, I just want my channel to grow, and I want to reach out to more of you guys and get to know everybody, so leave a comment there. Find me on Instagram too. We can chat there. DM me, whatever. I don't know. I'll try to respond. But yeah, that's all I have for you guys this week. Make it a good one, and I will see you guys back here next Tuesday. All right. Bye.